So I've kind of skipped ahead here, and I'll go back in a second and show you how I got here, but first I just wanted to show you where I'm headed with this. I have the completed animatic from Cinema 4D loaded here into After Effects, and I can render the output from all three camera angles just to find out which angle and camera movement, if any, I want to use for this shot. My favorite of the three so far is this dolly shot here, which, as you can see, starts sort of dead on, and then dollies to the left and pans right as the character approaches his landing spot in the blocking. So you'll notice a few things about this shot. First off, if we hang on this shot rather than cutting away, what's going to happen? Can you guess? I mean, it's always the same thing. Somebody is going to step into this doorway. Now, depending on what our story is, it's either going to be the dame in a film noir, holding a gun, or it's going to be the little girl in like a made-for-lifetime drama, or the killer in a horror movie. Somebody key to what this character is going to bend down and uncover beneath the bed will show up right here. Why? Because it's on the third. It will constantly draw our eye. You can't stop looking at it, can you? I mean, it's just something natural that our brains do, which is why composition is so powerful. If you create an image like this, it's going to affect the viewer's mind, and you'll want to make sure that the effect that you are creating matches what's happening or going to happen in the story at that given moment, which is why understanding the language of film is so important. Now, you'll notice that not only is the door on a third, but our point of interest, where this character is going to be bending down, is also on a third. And we have these, we have these really nice wedges here. We have a wedge on top and a wedge on the bottom. And as we get more into Blade Runner, you'll find that the wedge is Ridley Scott's favorite compositional shape. It's mine too. I really like them. I use them a lot in my work as well. And while I'm on the subject, let's cover just a few sort of rules with wedges. They never settle in the corners. If you start watching some of your favorite films, you'll notice wedges all over the place. And you'll notice that they never meet in a corner anywhere. You'll never see a wedge meet perfectly. It'll either meet, just a little off here, here. The target area is usually between here and here. Like in this area here or that area here. So I kind of fussed a little bit. I got it about here, just cutting it kind of close. And then the other thing you'll notice is that the wedges were never in parallel. If you were to follow the lines of both these wedges out to infinity, eventually they would intersect. They would meet at a vanishing point. And so even if the vanishing point is subtle, they should always meet up at some point from our perspective. And quite frankly, parallel lines should never ever exist in your compositions. You should avoid them at all costs if you can. The horizon line should be the only line in your shot that is ever parallel to your frame. And even then, if it's the most dominant line in your shot, it should exist on a third or a fourth or a fifth. And it doesn't hurt at that point if it's still kind of cutting the frame in half or cutting your composition in half to just cock the angle a little bit. In this case, this line here is my horizon line, it's pretty close to being parallel, to being perfectly flat. A little too close for my taste, so I would probably make some adjustments to get rid of that. But well, one of the tricks that I see Ridley Scott do a lot when it comes to doorways, Marvel Comics does this as well when it comes to someone standing in a doorway or walking through a doorway, is drop the camera down near the floor and then shoot up, which will change these lines so they're no longer parallel, and then cock the camera to one angle or the other so that the top of the door frame is not even with the frame. And I will show you that a little later on about how you can sort of combat those things. But and as I said, we'll cover more of this as we start getting into analyzing Blade Runner and the way that movie was put together and just how you can apply that to your compositions. Now, in case you're confused about where all this came from, this is essentially the same set that we were building in the previous tutorial, only it has more detail. So if we were to bounce over here to Cinema 4D, you can see here is that fully rendered frame from that camera angle that we saw in After Effects. And there's three versions of the same shot here with the same blocking. I've got a static shot here. I've got a shot which is essentially the same starting base point as this static shot, and static just means that the camera doesn't move. And and that pans over to follow our character, which is kind of a fake version of our dolly shot, which starts dead on, and of course dollies left and pans right. And this fully rendered version here is kind of a quick render. So I can see what the fog and the lighting are doing to our character. But the moment, and the way that you get that is you just select the portal and then click this button here, which is renders the active view. But the moment I click away, or the moment I click the frame, you can see it goes back to our sort of default view. So let me walk you through the animation here. You can see as I scroll through animation wise, you can see the blocking is the same with every character, and our end frame is pretty close to being the same on every single one. But what the difference is, if you just pay attention here, there's no movement on the camera. Our guy just walks in and settles on his spot. Whereas on this one, we do our fake tracking movement where we just pan over. And then, of course, our top one, the one that we covered in After Effects, is starts dead on and then dollies left and pans right, which I think is a little more dynamic. But it's up to you. It's like when you look at these, you're like, well, which one do you choose? And it's again, it's up to you. But what storyboarding like this gives you is the opportunity to experiment and find something that you just absolutely love, so that you can set it up and apply it in the real world and get a much higher production value. And I'll render all these out later so you can see them move with the light and the fog, and then compare them. But let's take a look at everything I did first to get to this point, and then so you can begin to learn what you need to know to be able to do this on your own. By the way, I apologize. There's some sort of leaf blower or weed whacker or something in the neighborhood just going in the background of this, and hopefully it won't last very long. Hopefully it's gone now. They're done. So one of the things you'll notice is I changed the framing here. I've changed the size of my portals. You can grab and resize these, but I resized them so they're approximately the same size as my camera frame, so that when I'm working in here, I know exactly framing wise what I'm going to get without having to constantly render it out. I'm going to middle click here to make this go full screen, well, as far as full screen as we can get, so we can go in and examine the construction that's gone on here. You can see that I've added a wall here. I've added a couple of lights in the hallway to simulate like sconces. And the way that I created this wall, this wall is just a copy of this wall. I just grab and just click and, what do you call it, command click or control click, depending on which platform you're on, and just dragged it over there. I've added some paneling and some leveler blinds, created and applied some materials to the geometry, added lights, cameras, and some simple animation, as well as atmospheric fog. Now the atmospheric fog, let me cover some terminology here for you to kind of bring you up to speed. So one of the first things that's universal to all 3D platforms is something called geometry. Now, all of your objects, your people, your walls, your figures, your boxes, everything that you create in here that's a tangible object is called geometry. So when you hear me reference geometry, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about these wall panels and the leveler blinds and the figure and the bed and these little dresser-like things. It's all geometry. And all geometry can have materials applied to them. And your materials are created down here. This is your material editor and creator. You can see I've created all these materials, and I'll show you how to create those in a minute. But then it's basically like a paint job. You basically are painting your geometry with whatever material you create. Like for instance, if we go in and if I click out of this, I sort of gave our figure a paint job. I gave him this ridiculous sweater and these absolutely ridiculous high-waisted pants, which I didn't have a choice. It's just the way that the figure comes in. His waist is really high and looks kind of dumb, so when you put pants on him, you get these just dorky-looking pants. And so we're kind of stuck with them. And then atmospherics. I want to cover atmospherics. If I middle-click again in here, you can see this giant box that I've made around our room, and the way atmospherics work, they're sometimes referred to as volumetrics. For instance, the fog that we have in our scene is called volumetric fog. It's not a surface material like paint or stone or metal or glass. It has volume, kind of like water or fog. And it operates in pretty much the same way as a fog machine in the real world. You fill a space with fog so the light can interact with it. And in this case, I created a giant box with around the scene and then applied this fog material to it, which fills it with fog. And then, blam, when I go in here and render this out, now my lights have rays. So how is all this done? Well, we've covered the construction pretty well. This back wall back here obviously is just a copy of this far wall dragged into place. If we were to take an overhead view, if I were to center click here, I just took this wall and copied it over here and stretched it out. And we've covered that in the previous tutorial. You just control drag on a PC, command drag on a Mac to make those copies. And then the leveler blinds. I'm going to show you how to make those. Those are, I guess you could call it fun, but maybe not so much. Let's zoom in. You can see there's a bunch of them in here. And right now I have them all selected as a single object. So if I were to come in, I think I've got it here, blinds 1. If I select it over here in the object viewer, I can just click this and it selects all of them, and then I can either I can move them out of the way, I can rotate them, I can do everything I want to. And so I basically built these first, and then grouped them all together, and then copied them and moved them over here, and then of course resized them. And I'm trying to be committed to keeping these things short, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this tutorial here and cover the leveler blinds and how to make your figure posable and animatable, and then how to drop in your lights and cameras in the next tutorial. So just go over to that one and we'll start with the blinds and then we'll move on.